Okay, and for those of you who don't know me or know me and maybe need a refresher, I'm Sean Silver. I'm with MassDEP. I'm with the Commercial Waste Reduction Branch at MassDEP. If you are coming to the Massachusetts Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting, and you're in the right place this morning. So, welcome. See some familiar faces here, and that's great. See a couple folks maybe we haven't seen before. That's also great. These meetings are designed as an opportunity to interface with various stakeholders throughout the state on the world of waste and recycling. Obviously, we have goals and initiatives that we're working on. You all have, whether you're a business, institution, public sector, private sector, wherever you're coming from. You have your own goals and needs and insight from what's going on out there in the world. We meet quarterly with this group, occasionally as needed when there's something pressing that we need to get together for. But this is the June meeting. The next meeting, we usually set a placeholder for the fourth Thursday of the month in October. So we'll have a big summer gap here before we all get back together again in October. But, really enjoy these opportunities to get together. Hopefully it's useful for you folks to hear about what we're doing or what, in the case of today, right? We've got some research on the agenda with a study of the commercial food waste ban economic analysis. So hopefully some helpful and interesting numbers there. And of course, we invite feedback. We invite questions from the group. We've got everybody muted to start because just logistically, that's it's not a big mess of people jumping in. But if you do have something that you'd like to add, please raise your hand. We'll get to you, or you can type comments into the chat as well, and we will make sure to answer those. I think for the most part, for some of these presentations, we'll try to do Q&A at the end. But definitely reach out to me directly in the chat. Whatever, we'll try and make sure that your concerns are addressed if there are any. So at this point, I'm just going to briefly introduce John Fisher of MassDEP. You all know John. John is going to provide some context for the first presentation that we're having this morning on the commercial food waste ban economic analysis.
Great. Thank you, Sean. I think probably most people on the call know that food waste has been a priority for us in Massachusetts for a long time, and reducing the amount of food waste going for disposal. And of course, that's driven in large part by the fact that food waste represents the single greatest material category in our trash. So that makes it a priority for us pretty clearly. But we also realize there are other important benefits to capturing wasted food, one of which is opportunities for job creation and economic growth in those business sectors. Businesses that are hauling food material, processing it, businesses that are collecting it for donation and rescue. So a while back, when shortly after the rollout of the 2014 food waste ban, we had contracted with ICF to conduct a study on the economic benefits associated with activity around that ban. And that study produced some really interesting and I think exciting results at that point about showing the number of people that those businesses and organizations employed, the amount they contributed to the state economy, and other really important economic metrics along those lines. So now, actually, almost 10 years later now, we're about 9 years later. We decided it was well past time to take another look at those benefits. So we had contracted with ICF again to conduct a similar study as to what they did back in what they published back in 2016. So I'm going to turn to George Voigt from ICF to go through the findings of this updated study. I think they're really interesting, and I'm sure I think you guys will probably find it interesting as well, and should be, a good opportunity to ask some questions about the study results and findings. So with that, I will turn it over to George, and he'll run through the study and explain everything that they did and what they found.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Nice to meet everyone. George Voigt here with ICF. I'm joined by my colleague Eliza Johnston, who's a director of public policy and helped put together the sort of previous iteration of this study back in sort of 2015, 2016 period. Um, just going through the sort of agenda of this presentation, we're going to walk through the methodology that we used to survey industry organizations, as well as extrapolate those industry survey results out to broader sort of sector-wide trends. We're going to run through the snapshot of those industry trends, both at the sort of survey respondent level and at the industry sector level. We'll walk through the economic impact methodology. There have been some changes from the previous study, so those of you who have looked at that report and presentation over time might notice those, and we'll kind of clarify where those differences come up. We'll then walk through the economic impact results, as well as the organic ban perceptions, both from the survey and from some targeted interviews that we conducted. We'll have sort of a quick conclusion of some key impacts and findings that we found from the study, and then open it up to Q&A. As Sean mentioned, if there are things that come up during the presentation, feel free to reach out to him, and we can address those during the presentation. So diving into the survey methodology, we distributed this survey probably to several of the organizations that are present on this call. In total, we reached out to 117 industry contacts. The survey period ran between January 7th and March 14th of this year, and we received sort of 30 distinct responses that comprise 37 unique responses. And the reason those numbers are a little bit different from each other is that for organizations that conduct multiple sort of sectors of activity, so you'll see on the right here of the pie chart, we roughly broke up these industry organizations into four different groups: the collection and hauling activities, processing activities, rescue and food recovery activities, and then other activities. Those organizations that do multiple segments of that pie chart were classified as unique responses so that we could more effectively estimate industry level impacts. And we targeted specific stakeholders in sort of waste collection and hauling, processing, which includes composting as well as anaerobic digestion, other sorts of food waste processing, food rescue and recovery organizations, and then other organizations, which is a new designation in this study, differing from the 2016, which includes some organizations that didn't quite fall into the traditional definitions of food rescue or processing, such as manufacturing, compostable product distribution, and then hot meals and emergency food pantry organizations. And the topics in the survey really focused on sort of the employment, the sort of revenue, the food waste tonnage that these organizations were processing, any capital expenses and investments that they were incurring over the past couple of years, both in response to the 2022 expansion of the ban down to half a ton, as well as sort of independent decisions that they were making just from growth in the industry. And then once we had the results, the way that we extrapolated from the survey responses to industry sector level information was taking it back to those 117 industry contacts that the MassDEP provided to us to get a sense of where the distribution of kind of collection and hauling versus processing versus rescue organizations were. And we also used some MassDEP and CET data to normalize our results around the expected levels of food tonnage and processing that were occurring in each of these sectors, so that we identified if our survey responses were skewed towards, larger organizations or smaller organizations to get a better sense of those extrapolated results. So jumping into the industry trends, at a high level, some key takeaways is that we've seen a lot of growth in both institutional and residential customer markets. Food recovery and rescue has grown the most of all the four categories since the 2016 study, encompassing a 93% increase in total tonnage. That total employment has continued to grow to support this increased demand, both from residential and from institutional customers, and that among rescue and processing organizations, the key for those continues to be some of the larger customers in terms of organic food waste production. So there's still some barriers to reaching out to smaller food waste producers in order to kind of wrap them into rescue and processing operations. So this first figure that we have encompasses average tonnage per organization. And so what we've seen is the 2016 study both asked retrospectively down to 2010 as well as current operations in 2015 and 2016. So those are going to be the first three sets of data points. And then this 2024 study added on the additional impacts that companies have experienced since the 2015-2016 study. What we'll note here is that collection and hauling is the one sector that does decrease from 2015 to 2016, and that's per average tonnage per organization. There have been more collection and hauling companies that have begun operating since that 2015-2016 period. And so the smaller companies may be bringing down that average as compared to processing and rescue, which have seen pretty substantial increases in terms of their average tonnage from the 2016 to 2024 period. This translates into the first of the extrapolated figures. So this is total tonnage for each of the industry segments. So this includes collection, hauling, processing, and rescue. We'll see that, collection and hauling are both mapped pretty closely to each other, which is an expected result that you would hope that you wouldn't have too much more of one or the other, but that both have continued to increase since 2016, and that rescue has increased the most, up to 37,000 tons in 2024. So there's been a significant growth in the rescue and food recovery sector over the last 8 years. Next, we're looking at average employment per organization here. So these estimates again present results from sort of 2010 in the dark green, 2016 in the middle shade of green, and then 2024 in the light green. We'll see that collection and hauling experienced the largest increase in average number of employees between that period, which also lines up with some of the broader trends that we're seeing for that sector, where expansion into more labor-intensive sectors of organic waste diversion is, the collection and hauling processing and rescue organizations don't require as many hands as they scale up and scale to meet increased demand. And so you see that reflected as well in those sectors with increased employment per organization, but not nearly as much as the collection and hauling sector. Again, we're going to jump out to the extrapolation here. And so we'll see similarly with, the collection and hauling having maybe more consolidation in the sector. So that larger number of employees per organization is somewhat muted by a smaller number of organizations there, in contrast to processing and rescue, where there might be smaller organizations with fewer employees, but there are more of them comparatively as they expand out. And so the growth from 2016 to 2024 in those organizations is still significant. So then the third category of questions that we asked organizations about was their annual revenue. And so these figures present both the average revenue per segment and then a histogram of revenue per uh, survey respondent, kind of broken up into buckets of revenue per year. There are a couple, or we experienced sort of one significant outlier, the Greater Boston Food Bank, which was excluded from the figure on the left because, at over $10 million per year, it would have had the other category significantly higher than pretty much any other segment in the survey respondents, and that seemed a little out of skew with the general perception of how those segments compete with each other in terms of average revenue. We'll also note that on the figure on the right, which is looking at that histogram of revenue per survey respondent company, the majority of those large organizations with more than $1 million per year in revenue, 66% of them were either collection, hauling, or processing sectors. So those are still sort of the major large players in the organic waste sector. Moving on to the extrapolated revenue per segment, what we'll see here is that collection and hauling has increased the most from 2015 to 2024 in terms of sort of dollar values, whereas rescue increased proportionally the greatest amount. This is consistent with a lot of the other findings that we've seen where collection and hauling and processing continue to be sort of some of the main diversion choices that customers are selecting, but there's been a significant increase in rescue adoption and awareness amongst customers, both at the institutional and at the sort of smaller scale food producer level. So there's been larger proportional growth in that segment, but it's still a smaller subset of the overall food waste diversion industry. One of the things that we've seen with the processing segment and some of the things that we heard during our interviews was that because a lot of customers anticipated the transition to the half-ton ban in 2022, a lot of them chose to start diverting organics waste before then. And so the impact of the ban in 2022 was mitigated a little bit by this anticipatory transition and starting to utilize those services before the ban was put in place. And so that's why some of the processors identified that they didn't see as much significant growth from 2015 to 2024 because some of their customers were already in that group of companies that produce between half a ton and 1 ton, but they chose to start diverting organics waste earlier. So then we move on to looking at capital investment that has been sourced from these companies. The histogram on the left shows average capital investment over a 4-year period from the number of companies broken out by industry segment. See that collection and hauling is a major driver of this. There's a lot of capital intensive equipment. Processing is also very capital intensive, but there seems to have been less investment over the last 4 years compared to the growth in the collection and hauling companies and what they're investing in. Most of the companies that we also asked a prospective question, and a lot of companies indicated that there was additional investment planned over the coming years. And so that growth would continue, that these weren't sort of capital incurrences that were going to be, placed between 2021 and 2024 and then not having much growth moving forward. A lot of companies were anticipating growth. So now we're moving on to some of the questions we asked around where companies and segments source their customers, who they were receiving food waste from. These figures represent number of customers, so it's not a tonnage per customer analysis. This also excludes, there was a segment in the responses that companies could identify other and then provide some narrative description about what their other customers were. A lot of those customers were residential curbside pickup programs. And so, because of the comparatively low tonnage value for those customers compared to places like institutions and food retailers and manufacturers, were excluded from these two figures as a result because tonnage-wise, they were a much smaller component. So the majority of collection and hauling customers come from those food retailers and institutions. It's about 63%. And for processing, the two main segments are restaurants, food institutions. Food retailers comprise a smaller portion for processing compared to collection and hauling. And then moving on to the other two industry segments of food rescue and recovery and the other segment, which again is the sort of manufacturing, compostable product distribution, and then hot meals and emergency food pantries. These include the other category because there are a lot of smaller customers for these segments that are sort of applicable to the broader industry trends here. So you'll see the majority of customers in food rescue and recovery are coming from food retailers, 59%, and then 26% of their customers are under that other classification. And for the other category, the vast majority, 63%, are customers coming from institutions, with 22% from other and 15% from restaurants. So now we're going to transition into talking a little bit about the economic impact methodology, walking through the results. The model that was used for this analysis is called Lightcast. It's an input-output model, and it generates three distinct metrics of impact in categories. The direct impacts, which are the economic impacts associated with the spending an organization produces. So if a collection and hauling company spends $1 million on its employees every year and the wages associated with that and the economic impact that is derived from those wages, those are the direct impacts. The indirect impacts are those that are associated with the supply chain. So if that same company were to purchase trucks, if there was, manufacturing of those trucks or manufacturing of the specialized equipment that they installs on the trucks for hauling, that would be classified under those indirect impacts. And then the induced impacts are what we typically consider to be the ripple impacts throughout the economy. So when those workers spend their wages at a grocery store or going out to eat or going to a movie, those spending patterns impact and grow the local economy, and those are the induced impacts. In terms of the sort of quantifiable metrics that come out of this model, it generates estimated employment in terms of full-time equivalent jobs. It estimates labor income, value added, and industry activity. So labor income is, a combination of kind of how many employees you have and what the employees' average wages are. The value add is what those employees are generating in terms of value from the product, what's being sold versus what the inputs to the product are. And then the industry activity is similar to like a gross domestic product or a gross regional product that you might see in other economic reports. One note here before we dive a little bit further is that the 2016 report used a different modeling software, Implan. So there are some minor differences in how those two softwares model the relationship between direct, indirect, and induced impacts, as well as the underlying values used for average employee compensation in a given sector, and they model inputs slightly differently. So Implan has its own set of industry sectors, and like casts uses NAICS sectors. So we'll walk through that, but you'll note that there are some differences. We've converted all the 2016 results into sort of like cast results. We used the same inputs from 2016 and converted them. So if you're familiar with that report, you might see some small differences in terms of the numbers from 2016. So these are the inputs that we use. So on an annual basis, you can see the payroll and employee compensation for collection and hauling is 46.9 million, for processing 7.3 million, for rescue 8.6 million, and for the other category 1.8 million. The NAICS codes are listed at the top, and then the associated sectors are located below. So just to sort of provide the example of one of them, the 562998 sector under collection and hauling is associated with all other miscellaneous waste management services. And so that mapping continues consistently for all the sectors. This then gets run through the model, and the estimated output that we see for the direct industry activity, 506 jobs for collection and hauling, 169 jobs for processing, 128 jobs for rescue, and 23 jobs for other. You'll see that the payroll employee compensation, some of that gets sort of moved into other indirect expenses. So it's not a direct line from the inputs into here, but part of that goes into, value added other intermediate inputs. And you see that the sort of overall revenue that's being generated by these companies is significantly higher. So 103 million for collection and hauling, 33.8 million for processing, 33.9 for rescue, and 33.4 for the other category. So going on to the next couple slides are going to look at kind of the comparison between 2016 and 2024, both from direct and indirect results, or direct and total results, my apologies. And at a high level, what we found was, there's a really significant amount of economic activity that's being driven by these organic waste organizations and companies associated with hauling, collection, processing, that they're supporting over almost 1,700 jobs across the Commonwealth, generating $143 million in labor income, $194 million in value add, and $390 million in industry activity. And that the collection and hauling sector experienced the largest growth from 2016 to 2025, where we're seeing, consistent with the previous figures, a lot of growth in terms of both tonnage, growth in terms of revenue, number of employees. There's lots of impact from those sectors, and that especially as more residential programs and more commercial customers join into those hauling programs to pick up organic waste, there'll be continued growth across those sectors. So this is the direct economic impact results. So again, these are sort of direct employment by the company, direct spending on labor income, direct spending in terms of value add and industry activity generated by the companies. It doesn't include any organizational sort of supply chain impacts. It doesn't include any of the induced spending that gets thrown throughout the economy as a result of this direct spending. So kind of walking through for each industry segment, there are the 2016 results that have been run through like cast, and then the 2024 results. Of note, you'll see that the processing segment does experience some decrease here. Our estimation is that this is partly because of splitting out the other category, as well as some reclassification of processing industry organizations from one industry segment to another. So of all the categories, the processors uh, had the lowest sort of proportional contribution towards overall industry activity, compared to, collection hauling, which sees a significant increase, rescue organizations, which have seen a significant increase in terms of tonnage, revenue, total employment over the period from 2016 to 2024. And when you roll it all up to the cumulative impacts on the far right, it's a significant increase in the direct employment within the organic waste sector from, just under 500 employees in 2016 to over 750 in 2024. And there's a similar sort of roughly 50% increase across all of the economic metrics that are shown here. And then when we move on to looking at the total economic impact, so again, this includes those supply chain and those induced impacts of employee spending. It's a really significant number of employees, as we were highlighting at the beginning, almost 1,700 employees supported through this organic waste industry in the Commonwealth, $143 million in labor income, $390 million in industry activity. Again, a lot of it's coming from that collection and hauling growth, and the rescue and food recovery sort of proportionally is experiencing, a very significant increase from the support at MassDEP through, increasing promotion and awareness of recovery opportunities. So that kind of wraps up the economic impact of the organic food waste ban. The last segment of the survey and the purpose of the targeted interviews was to sort of further understand what people's perception of the ban was, how it was being deployed on an organizational level, how things had changed over time. And so we basically broke down our conversations and the survey responses into two main categories of, places where companies were experiencing opportunities to utilize and leverage the organics ban, and places that they were experiencing, challenges with expansion or having conversations with potential customers. And so one of the things that came up was that there continue to be, individuals, stakeholders, and policymakers who aren't fully aware of the ban, and that continuing education around the ban has been helpful, and pushing that forward would continue to sort of expand the awareness and support of it, given the opportunities and the benefits of expanding the ban both to more commercial and institutional customers, and also starting to roll out some of the residential programs. There were several organizations that mentioned the benefits of the tax credit for food donation, and the potential state tax credit that's being discussed, and the opportunities to leverage that in conversations with their potential customers, as well as talking to individuals about, the benefits of diverting organics out of the waste stream, bringing customers into compliance that may not be, or, may not be fully aware of it, and then being able to market value-added services like diversion from existing, waste transferring and waste hauling services that are already being uh, purchased by customers. Moving over to some of the challenges, several of processing entities mentioned that, zoning requirements for specific processing facilities can raise challenges and slow down expansion because of the sort of differentiation between how far hauling has to go in order to make it sort of economically viable to get to a processing facility, and also benefiting from, not having those facilities located too close to residential or other agricultural zoned areas. A couple of the processing and hauling companies mentioned that, a lot of their customers already were participating before the half-ton ban came into place. They were participating from the 1-ton level, and so there hasn't been a lot of growth in that sense. But I think that's kind of a benefit of, a successful program if people are already joining in when it's not required of them. And then there were a couple groups that mentioned that they had some challenges talking to customers that were out of compliance, not feeling like they had the authority to say, well, you have to do this personally, but wanting them to comply with the ban being a challenging marketing opportunity or raising challenging conversations with them. And then there are some companies that, primarily service residential customers. And so, until there's a residential ban, the impacts of the commercial one are not really felt on their level. They continue to expand and have talked about the increased awareness and participation among residential customers, but that, at a high level, apart from awareness around food waste diversion, it wasn't impacting their operations on an annual basis. So moving on to sort of wrapping up in the conclusions, what we've seen across the conversations that we've had and the survey responded data that, indicates that there's been a significant amount of growth in the food waste industry. There's a lot more cultural acceptance and awareness around waste diversion, and then that continues to grow. All of the industry segments that we identified did continue to grow at, varying levels, but they're all continuing to increase from their 2016 levels. And combined, those four industry segments are generating, as we mentioned, almost 1,700 jobs on an annual basis, supported both in indirect, direct, and induced impacts across the Commonwealth. And a lot of companies mentioned that the sort of gradual and really deliberate rollout of ban increases has allowed capacity to increase over time with the increased demand and has mitigated a lot of challenges that other municipalities and regions have faced when they try and bring too many people under an organics ban too quickly, and you end up with contamination and issues with scaling. So there's been a lot of support for MassDEP's efforts and sort of deliberate process when tackling this organics waste issue. So with that, I'll sort of open it up to any questions. I didn't see anything come through while I was talking, but feel free to sort of raise your hands or ask away.
Yeah, thank you, George. Some very interesting findings there, and obviously good to get that data up to date as things have evolved here over time. I do see a raised hand from Janet. Janet, would you like to speak?
Thanks. George, thanks for all that. I think my question is really more for John because I'm having trouble processing, no pun intended. We, so let me just break it down so I can articulate. We've got people that eat apples and there are apple cores left, and those are food scraps. And then there are perfectly good apples like that are in a supermarket and they decide, there's a small bruise on them and they're going to throw them away when they're perfectly edible. And to me, that's food waste. And the food scraps, like I'm excited if there's an industry that is expanding and building and more people are employed, et cetera, to address that. But I sort of feel like these numbers combine the two streams. And of course, we don't want more actual edible food waste. We want to capture what there is, but the goal would be to have zero of that. Like people are always going to hopefully eat apples and bananas and there'll be food scraps. And so we absolutely want none of those going to disposal. But like, how should I think about the numbers that were presented here in that context of what our actual goals are? Like divert all food scraps and reduce to nothing edible food waste.
Well, I'm not sure these numbers relate directly to that question. And I don't think I think directionally we wouldn't disagree with that goal. That hasn't been our specific goal, and I'm not sure we have the ability really to make that happen. I think at our last organic subcommittee meeting, we had a couple presentations focused on food donation and rescue and what we can do to more effectively leverage food donation and rescue. From my perspective, I've been willing or not willing to push too hard on trying to drive food donation or businesses to direct food to food donation for fear of inadvertently having those businesses maybe see food rescue and donation organizations as an outlet for managing food that's really not good and safe to serve to people. So I've always been concerned about pushing too hard on that and winding up having food that ends up being food waste going to food donation and rescue organizations and having them stuck with the cost of managing that material. I think aspirationally, the goal of having no good food wasted is a good one. I think in reality, it just doesn't happen. Inventory is not perfect. Management and movement of food is not perfect. There are sometimes just logistical challenges to food donation and rescue. A lot of food donation and rescue organizations really don't, collect from restaurants, for example, because it just doesn't fit well with their program logistics and things like that. So conceptually, I don't think I disagree. I think, practically, that's getting to that zero wasted food number is a tough number to get to.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in with some other notes that we heard from some rescue and recovery organizations that we met with and responded to the survey that, to John's point about like currently because of the logistics around it, they have to meet a certain, number of, it's not the ton, it's not a half ton per pickup, but there has to be some threshold in terms of volume of edible food waste that they're collecting on a pickup basis in order to, be able to set up these routes and construct the infrastructure to go through and collect. And the combination of that and some of the challenges around, navigating, especially like from the restaurant perspective, having really narrow streets and pickup locations doesn't lend itself well to the types of vehicles that they're utilizing to conduct the rescue pickups.
I just wanted to add one other point, which is probably specific to maybe more the institutional sector, but relate to other food service businesses as well. At the meeting last week, there was a presentation by a woman from Sodexo. So I'm blanking on her name right now. I think it was Rose, but there are tracking systems that are used by sort of large business and institutional food service providers to track food waste trends and identify those trends and reduce them. And those have been really, really successful, achieving like upwards of 50% reduction in food waste. And those, I think, getting more widespread use of systems like that, getting them implemented more broadly across more businesses and institutions and more sectors. It's not going to get to that zero number, Janet, but it's going to make a really significant dent. And so that's the reduced food that's, not even going to composting or anaerobic digestion or anything like that, but it's being used in the food service establishment instead of winding up as, quote, food waste. So I think that's something that we can think about is how we can leverage more use of systems like that to reduce food waste, because they've been really achieved really good documented results in practice.
Thanks, Sean. I do see some raised hands here. Also, a comment in the chat about will the economic impact analysis be available online? And I think, yes, we posted the previous one. We will be posting this one, correct?
Yeah, that'll be published shortly. We'll also share the presentation that George just delivered. That'll be shared up to our SWAC webpage, and then we'll be posting the study, which has similar information as what George presented in a PowerPoint. That'll be posted to um, our food waste page where we have the other study, and we'll be sending out an email notice to both the SWAC list and the organic subcommittee list once those are available on the website.
Great. Let's do raised hands in order here. First, we had Phil.
Good morning, everyone. I want to pick up on what Janet mentioned, and I think it's an important point because I worked on a farm briefly in the 70s. My brother ran a farm, one of the small farms in Massachusetts under the Making It in Massachusetts campaigns in the
Sure.
80s, late 70s that some may recall. Our local farmers are under enormous amounts of stress and strain, and trying to make it in Massachusetts as a farmer is extremely difficult. I was excited to see at the Mass Ready Act announcement that they're going to support farms with some of that bond bill. The point I think is well taken that we've become used to going to big retail outlets with commoditized vegetables and fruits and things, and they're packaged, and people look for the certain perfect orange and tomato, and I know what really good fresh tomatoes look like in the summer on local farms, and they don't look like some of the other, and they're absolutely full of flavor and nutrients, and so I think there are things that the state could do to work with retailers, work with farmers, farm to table, to promote what they call in France ugly fruit, ugly vegetables. There's a whole campaign in Europe to convince people that that tomato is every bit as good as the one that's perfectly round and gassed to make it look a little different. And we get our food from so far away. They have to pick it at a certain point so that it ripens when it gets there. There's lots of considerations, logistics. We understand all of those things. But that being said, I think there's more that could be done at the consumer point of purchase to educate them and maybe even get a discount for something that looks a little different, but is still perfectly healthy to address some of that. Um, in concert with that, I think, working with composters, we're trying to build a facility on the Cape, getting rid of the little stickers, the little PLUs, I think they're called, the little plastic stickers. That's another distinct area that DEP could help out in. And with policy and working with the industry, there's some areas around the country that are working on different formats. So, the education for the consumer, the working with the retailers and the farmers and that connection to make sure good food gets to people that for nourishment, and we don't miss the opportunity um, because of that. So that supports the farmers, supports local outlets and smaller retailers, but we really need the fruit and the vegetables cleaned up with the packaging and the labels, because when it gets to the compost site, they've got to deal with that, and that could create problems for quality control. I'm reminded my mother grew up in the Depression in Braintree, and there weren't the social services there are now, and food was precious, and she got an orange for Christmas, and that was considered a massive gift. So food is a precious thing, and we are, it drove her crazy until the day she died that so much food was wasted. So I think it's a good point, and there's a lot that DEP can do. It's not infrastructure, but it's education. So I would suggest taking all those things into consideration and working with the retailers and the growers. Thank you.
Thanks for that input, Phil. And yeah, we certainly appreciate that connection there. Nice reference to the Make It in Massachusetts campaign as well. I see Steve Madera from Recycling Works also with a hand raised. I don't know if Steve has anything directly related to a previous comment, maybe from Recycling Works perspective. So if you'd like to go, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Sean. Yeah, Steve Bandera, Program Manager, Recycling Works. Yeah, I think what we do reflects a lot of what I've heard today. The goal of Recycling Works is to help businesses and institutions reduce their waste, both recycling and organics or food waste. We've been especially focused on food waste in lately. And we take the yes and or all of the above approach. So when we go into a business or institution, the first thing we talk to them about is source reduction. So let's not produce the waste to start with, or excess food. Let's not even call it waste. Let's not have excess food. But then if there is excess food, let's use it to feed other humans or animals. And then if we can't do that, then we would compost it or send it to AD. And then the landfill is always the last resort. So if we're talking about getting these numbers down to zero, as close to zero as we can, the all of the above approach is something that we really see works and something we advocate with everybody that we talk to. Thank you, Sean.
Yes, great. Thank you for that perspective. And of course, we always appreciate the things that Recycling Works is doing in this area and otherwise. And good too, food material, right? And I made sure with my slides today that I referred to this as food material, not food waste. That's something that we're always
Yes.
working on here. I see
Yeah,
a
that's
raised hand
definitely.
from Aru. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly. Would you like to speak, please?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Sean.
Yes,
Yeah, it's Eru
Aru.
with Erudite Strategy and Solutions and Eru
Yes,
or Erudite Farms. And our whole thing is sustainable farming and using the organic waste of local businesses and converting that into compost that we can use to grow food without the use of any chemicals. Um, I want to reemphasize or just piggyback on what Janice said earlier. It's because in doing this, I've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of potential partners in producing compost who have asked for assistance in diverting some of their organic waste into compost for my farm. And in reviewing their processes, I see that just a lot of the solid waste, the organic, or even within the organic waste, there's things that are not biodegradable. Um, I recently had the opportunity of participating in the Boston Compost Certificate Program, uh, which is part of the Garbage to Garden initiative, where they actually take compost. This is green bucket program, and like the gentleman spoke earlier about the stickers and other plastic materials, non-biodegradable things that are in what is labeled as compost that have to be removed and sorted later. And even before those organics are sorted out at their points of origin at these local businesses, you have um, you have waste that isn't properly sorted. So what my question is, and I'm not sure if this is a question for MassDEP or if it's for the presenter George and ICF and the ICF team, but I want to better understand what metrics are being established to do a more thorough cycle of life analysis on solid waste so that we can properly determine where the solid waste, whether it's reusable waste that can be recycled and repurposed in some other way, or it's organic waste that can hopefully be repurposed for my farm, where it ends up. Well, what suggestion, what effort is happening in that area?
great question, Aru. With the life cycle analysis is definitely something that is an important way to consider our waste. I'm not sure if anybody has maybe a specific answer to this or anything that we've worked on explicitly with regard to that with our programs.
From a life cycle analysis perspective, no, at least not a MassDEP.
Yeah.
There may be other organizations that have done work along those lines. The other thought, though, is just echoing the importance of getting good, clean separation of food material at the source is really important, regardless of where it's going, including for animal feed, composting, and anaerobic digestion. And I know that's something that Recycling Works consistently works on, and their technical assistance is working with businesses to try to ensure that as clean a stream as possible is being separated so that you don't have those downstream effects of contamination in the food waste stream.
Yeah,
John.
how's
Go
that
ahead.
being monitored then? That's what I'm saying. Like when the plan does when things don't go according to plan, and with despite all your efforts to make sure that people are sorting out their waste properly, are there are there any metrics to monitor that would be fortunate because it becomes a problem for the industries that solid waste is passed off to who are trying to do their job, like the ones that I mentioned, garbage regarding trying to clean up this stuff.
I think probably the best metrics would or way of taking stock of that would be feedback from from the facilities that are accepting the food material. Those facilities all have limits on the amount of residue that they can have, and that's probably the best place to try to get feedback on how that's working.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up too. I mean, the LCA is an interesting way of looking at things for sure, and a useful way of looking at things. I'm noticing here I have my video off. So there we go. Let's see. The bunch of comments in the chat. I do appreciate folks' feedback in there as well. But I don't think anything. I don't think we have anything else in terms of the question and answer variety. But at this point, I think I will thank George for one for his presentation there and the insight provided, and obviously it's touched off some discussion topics, which I should reiterate, we're always happy to have these conversations offline at future meetings. Wherever we're certainly open to discussing. As I see more chats roll in about Recycling Works, etc. If you need links, definitely go there. But we're always welcome to continue these conversations or have them as a topic for a future meeting. As we move to 11 o'clock, which means we got an hour left, I do want to move into the second part of today's meeting, which is going to relate to our solid waste master plan. The fact that we're halfway through to the 2030 solid waste master plan. And I'll let John give a brief overview of how we're going to look at this from two perspectives, one our municipal waste perspective and the other one from a commercial waste perspective.
Great, thanks, Sean. So, as probably many of you know, in our 2030 solid waste master plan, we made a commitment to do a mid-course review in 2025 to assess how the programs and policies are working, what's the optimal use of our staffing and funding resources, and make adjustments to these action plans that we have. And we do have those action plans in 4 areas, including construction demolition materials, organics, which is largely focused on the food waste issues that we've been talking about here. We have our reduce and reuse working group, and we have our recycling market development working group. But there's also a lot of the program work that we're doing that doesn't specifically fall under one of the purviews of those subcommittees, working groups, or action plans. And that includes some of the oversight of solid waste facilities, which is going to be a topic for a future SWAC discussion, and how everything related in the master plan related to oversight of solid waste facilities. That's going to be a separate discussion to come. But today we wanted to break out program work across the municipal waste reduction branch, focused largely on residential waste, as well as the commercial waste reduction branch that may not be specifically addressed within our other subcommittees, working groups, and action plans. And so today we'll have some presentations to update you on how those programs are going, what's been happening in those program areas, and then have some opportunities for feedback on how we're doing and suggested changes for what we're doing. So it's going to take part in 2 stages, 2 presentations, one focused on the municipal waste reduction programs and one on the commercial waste reduction programs. So I think we'll turn it to Rachel next to start with the municipal side. And you're on mute, Rachel.
Sorry about that. Everyone can see my slides. Great.
Yes.
Thanks very much. So my name is Rachel. Oh, let me go back. Sorry. I think after 5 years, I would know how to do this, but it's somehow different every single time. My name is Rachel Smith. I am the grant manager for the Municipal Waste Reduction Branch here at MassDEP. And today I'm going to be presenting updates from our Municipal Waste Reduction Branch team on behalf of our branch chief, Kathy Mirza. She's out on vacation this week. So she created these slides. She left me some notes. If I don't know an answer to a question, we can definitely get back to you, but I'm pretty familiar with everything that we do here. And I know I have some colleagues on the line as well that could certainly jump in or provide links and information if necessary. So as John mentioned, over the last few months, DEP has facilitated this midterm review, and the items that I'm going to be touching on today kind of fall outside designated committees and groups. So this is really an opportunity for you to hear about our work and allow time for your feedback on what's working well and what we may need to focus more on for the next 5 years. So within the Solid Waste Master Plan, our team oversees program that supports residential waste reduction. So this slide lists our overarching goals in the Solid Waste Master Plan relative to municipal solid waste programs that serve the majority of residents across the state. Slide lists the waste reduction priorities for our team. The first bullet, which is the Reduce and Reuse Action Plan, has already been covered in a separate meeting that was part of the R&R work group. So I'm not going to talk about that today, but the rest of the slide includes items that I would like you to think about as I review our program. And I've kind of broken this up into sections, so we'll pause after certain categories to take feedback then. So we frame our work in the Municipal Waste Reduction Branch as a 3-legged stool. We offer grants, and these include funding and equipment to help build and sustain local capacity and effective materials management. We have outreach and education tools that include a bevy of resources to support municipal programs and residents of the Commonwealth. And we have hands-on technical assistance that allows for relationship building and targeted program assistance through municipalities and regions. So I'm going to review each of these program areas to describe what's available, grants that have been awarded, and the other metrics that we use to evaluate the effectiveness of our work. First, let's talk about grants, and I'm very familiar with this. SMRP, which is the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program, is our largest annual grant for municipalities. And this is really designed to build capacity on the local level to support waste reduction, reuse, repair, composting, and the safe management of household hazardous wastes. So we want to help communities establish effective best practices for waste reduction that are cost-effective and sustainable over time. We also offer the annual Reduce, Reuse, and Repair microgrant, and that's for short-term projects that extend the life of products. Both of these grants experience high participation each year, and the microgrant in particular has grown substantially over the last few years. This slide here, it just highlights some of the distinctions between the two grant offerings, including who is eligible to apply, the main focus of the goals, and the estimated budget for each category. This slide shows the recent award information for our SMRP grants for the first half of the current solid waste master plan. So for the last 5 years. Last year for the 2024 cycle, we awarded almost $4.2 million in grant funds, and we're estimating a similar budget this year. Note, this is an estimate only. The actual awards and funding are going to depend on the number of applications and the type of requests that we get. And these are all being evaluated as we speak. So our staff is very busy this summer trying to review our 2025 cycle grants and get this work done. Slide here, it breaks out the different awards categories that are awarded through SMRP over the past 5 years since the current master plan was released. So we have drop-off equipment, which would be for transfer stations and recycle centers, food waste carts for collecting residential food waste curbside, pay-as-you-throw program funds, recycling dividends program, I'll touch a little bit on later, regional small-scale initiatives for regional groups to get funding, and then larger waste reduction grants, organics capacity grants, and household hazardous waste facility grants. So those are really like large-scale projects that are kind of lumped together, and we will talk about these in a minute. So as for RDP, it's the largest award category year after year. We wanted to go a little deeper here on this program. So the Recycling Dividends Program, or RDP, it's a best practice framework, and it's presented as a menu of waste reduction program options over 10 categories here on the right. Over the past 5 years, we've had 297 municipalities participate in RDP out of 352, so that's about 85%. The criteria has evolved over time, and we are constantly evaluating program impact, the funding awarded, new program options that merit inclusion, new technology, and just, updated best practices as we go. So how do we evaluate the impact of this grant? It's something that we're constantly doing. And one thing that we look at is we found that the municipalities with the lowest trash per household are cross-referenced with the programs employed from these best practices. And so we look at what they're doing in their program and how much trash they're generating per household. And the common factors that we see for these, the top 20 municipalities in the state that are generating the least amount of trash, we see solid waste programs that have pay-as-you-throw or trash limits, bulky waste collection fees, so charging residents a nominal fee to dispose of bulky items. CHARMS, which is a center for hard to recycle materials. So it's kind of these like specialized recycling opportunities for items that can't go in your regular curbside bin. And reuse programs. And as we all know, there's a variety of reuse programs. So besides those like top 4 categories that are, common across the board for our top performers, most of them also have household hazardous waste collection opportunities, whether they're permanent facilities or events, and they have organics collection for residents. So again, those food waste diversion opportunities. So those are, that kind of gives us like, okay, what's really working? And those seem to be categories that are moving the needle. I will say that municipalities love the RDP grant because it's not a reimbursement grant. They earn the points that are based on a dollar value by implementing these best practices. And then the grant funds that they receive are spent on other uses to invest in their program. So it's really designed to keep strengthening and investing in their programs over time, again, to move the needle and just to get better and better. Slide here shows some data from our RDP spending reports from the last 3 years we have. And we look at things that municipalities are spending their money on. So RDP funds are going most of the time to equipment, which is that's historically the highest spend, but it makes sense because carts and compactors and all that good stuff costs a lot of money. We were also pleasantly surprised to see an increase in spending on outreach and education initiatives, on recycling for public spaces, and organics diversion. So I guess I have to mention here the total spent and the balance carried over. As you can see, municipalities, they spent more money in 2024 than the past 2 years, which is something we hope to see. And we hope it continues because we still have a large balance remaining. It's almost $8 million in RDP funds have gone unspent. So this has been distributed to municipalities. And we really, again, we want to see the municipalities investing in these funds in the program in areas that will reduce their waste. There are many opportunities to improve or expand programs. And if you have ideas on how we can help promote reinvestment more, let us know. We're going to be taking a break and opening for Q&A shortly. So that could be the time. Okay, so now moving on to reduce, reuse, and repair microgrant. As mentioned earlier, this grant has a singular focus on reuse repair as opposed to recycling and composting. We see a lot of creativity and innovation in this space coming from small businesses, schools and colleges, nonprofit groups, and municipalities as well. The program has grown each year since inception, and this spring we received 92 applications. So it's representing a range of products from across the state from a variety of different groups. So our team, again, is currently evaluating these grants. We're busy doing that. Janice is going to drop a link in the chat, I think. And this slide just shows a few examples of some of the programs that we have funded over the past few years during this first half of the solid waste master plan cycle. So you can see it's lots of different ideas and lots of, it's very spread throughout the state. So here's where I'm going to pause and just see if there's any questions or comments related to the grants. So I can't read the chat, Sean, but if there's anything that came in the chat or people's hands are raised, we could certainly pause for a moment.
Yeah, Rachel, I would note that Janice, our teammate Janice Paré, has dropped some of the relevant links from this presentation into the chat, but we don't have any specific questions right now. Folks always welcome to raise hands. Seems like Rachel will be very receptive to any questions you might have.
Okay. Yeah, and we can always come back at the end, but I'm going to go to like our next section here, which is the I want to offer a snapshot of the education and outreach initiatives that we make available to municipalities. So hopefully everybody's well versed with our Recycle Smart MA resources. And these really work to educate Massachusetts residents about what can and cannot go in their home recycling bin. So this has been instrumental in our efforts to provide consistent messaging across the state, to reduce confusion, and to support the collection of high quality recyclables that are going to be made into new products and packaging. So MassDEP consults with the material recovery facilities, or the MRFs. We work with them regularly, and we produce this list of acceptable materials that is built by consensus and MRF capabilities. So when we define recyclable and when we say that an item can be recycled, this is what we mean. The material cannot harm workers or equipment at the MRFs. The MRF equipment must be able to handle the material, and there must be a consistent market for the material. So those are the three things that go into consideration as we put this initiative and make these resources available. Recycle Smart MA resources, they include social media posts, videos, newsletters, frequently asked questions, and they have translations of outreach materials into 12 languages. I want to do a special shout out here on the Recyclopedia. It's a search tool, and I've worked here at MassDEP for 6 years and I still use this tool, like probably monthly or every other month or so. So I want to tell everybody that you should bookmark this. If you're a municipality, you should put it on your website. It's updated all the time, and it's really helpful, and it's really geared toward the general public and residents. Our Beyond the Bin directory is also located on recyclesmartma.org. Beyond the Bin is another search tool, and it allows users to find nearby outlets for materials that are not appropriate for curbside recycling, but that they can be recycled or reused if taken to the right place. So, for example, a material that might be able to be recycled but not in your normal curbside bin would be textiles. And if you use the Beyond the Bin directory, it can tell you where to bring those items. So to be able to do all of this education and outreach work, MassDEP does work with a professional environmental consultant, and they support this initiative, and they provide metrics on a monthly basis. So we can actually see the results of our efforts, and we can see the results for social media and web pages and visits. Month after month, Beyond the Bin, that sees the highest level of activity from users. And our other efforts have demonstrated strong results as well. We also learn about the effectiveness of our social media posts, noting which have shown the most traction. So which posts are getting the most shares, the most likes, the most views. So remember, the goal of this initiative is to spread the word about recycling right in Massachusetts. Okay, and now we have another pause break to address any questions or comments about education and outreach.
Anybody out there? I do see that Janice dropped in a link for Beyond the Bin, and sometimes this comes up in conversations about, what do I do with this, or where can I find out what to do with that? She's got the link for add a listing right there. So appreciate that, Janice. Janet actually has raised her hand again. Janet, would you like to speak?
What do you mean again? Okay, Rachel. This is on behalf of John Fisher, who I know is a runner. I am not a runner, but I do hang around with runners. And I've had in the past couple of months, two different people ask me, what do I do? I want to get rid of those medals that you get at races because people, do 2 races a weekend. They have 100 in their room. They don't want them anymore. And I looked up medals and sports medals and couldn't find either one in the excellent recyclopedia, whatever you call it. I use this all the time too. It's just such a great tool, but I feel like I have to get back to these people with an answer. So if you can help.
I mean, that's a good. Janice Pare manages our recyclopedia, and I know she's adding new things all the time. So, I mean, maybe that's something for us to consider. But again, we have to kind of like see first, might have to research the outlets ourselves. I don't know if you have anything to add, Janice.
I don't think we know of any outlets for them. My suggestion would be don't take it. They just accumulate. I mean, Don might know, but there used to be like trophy places might used to be able to take like plaques back and stuff. I have not heard of that in a long time. And I'm not even sure if the medals are actually metal. John might know.
Yeah, John's got his hand raised.
Yeah, that's my field of interest, Janet. So first thing I'd say is there's a real source reduction opportunity there, and this may be like a running snob kind of thing to say, but there are a lot of races where everyone gets a finisher medal, and it's just not. I'm sorry, it's just not necessary. If you run a 5K, you don't need a finisher medal. So that would be, I personally would give that feedback to race organizers. Like don't need to be giving out like 500 finisher medals for anyone who finishes a 5K. It's kind of silly.
Oh, John, there's some people in my Instagram feed who would be very upset about not getting to display their 5K medal.
Yeah. Well, you got to get faster and then get an age group place and then display that. So that's
Tracy just made a point in the chat. Sorry to interrupt. She said we'll
oh
recycle them along with our C&D scrap metal. And my head kind of thinks like, there's been some very specialized collection things where organization businesses, right? It helps create the root density for it. Maybe there could be a way where like race organizers could do metal take back events and then shift them over to Casella or whomever, right? And Irene just popped a link in there as well.
yeah, and I think I think it was Janice who asked, are they metal? I think they usually are. I mean, there's a fabric, a fabric strip to it, but like a ribbon, but the usually the metal is actually metal. So, like to Trace's point, like if those could be collected effectively, those could go in scrap metal recycling. That's a possibility.
Okay, well, it's good to know that they are actually metal. I do have a couple of them, and I was never sure, if they were like an amalgamation or something. But in that case, I would say find scrap metal place to take them, and we could add them in the recyclopedia as like scrap metal. I just took some water bottles over to my local scrap metal dealer, and I was happy to give them away without getting my 59 cents in return. So it's a really nice way to offload to take them to the scrap dealers.
Yeah, there's ways about this, obviously. It's just the question of can we get something that's makes it easy and accessible for all people so they don't, even so they don't necessarily have to make the trip. Or like I don't know, a bunch of years ago I had a bunch of trophies, probably from my childhood, and I looked for trophy recycling. I found a place that would accept them mail, take back. I think I had to pay some money to send it, but I cleaned out that box of trophies, right? So there's people who go above and beyond to do it, and then there's people who, just really want to be really at their fingertips, and that makes sense. And that's kind of why I mentioned like think about that the beer holder, the beer tops for the 6 packs, right? And how they set up a collection programs at retailers to get all those. That's a very specific waste stream, right? But there's races all the time. There's organizations that put together races. Maybe there's some way to make this like an actual thing. I don't know, just wishful thinking. Seeing some stuff popping up in the chat here. Yeah, Courtney mentions her experience accumulating medals from rowing. Look at that. Irene, we used to take trophies at the Shirley Recycle Your Reusables event, but not since 2020. Maybe add again. Yeah. As a t-ball coach, there's always one or two leftover trophies at the end of the season I got another box accumulating. I know we got to get back to Rachel here. I do see a question here or a comment about batteries causing lots of fires at Murph's from David. Wanted to acknowledge that, A, and B, also mention that's I sent out a link to the SWAC email list the other day about the EPR Commission. Batteries are specifically something that we're talking about there and in other places. So stay tuned to that conversation that we're having about batteries as well, because we see the news. We know that it's out there. Batteries and propane tanks. Stephen. Karen says, where can I find the top communities who have the lowest trash per household?
I can send her the link, Rachel. I would also just say that Recycle Smart Massachusetts posts regularly about keeping batteries out of the recycling and trash. If you have a social media, channel that you use, Facebook or Instagram, you are more than welcome to share that over and over and over again because it is a very, very hot topic.
No pun intended, I'm sure. And, Recycle Smart, just can't say enough about Recycle Smart. I've had so many people say to me, like, everybody needs to know about Recycle Smart. It's not MassDEP. This is people saying to me from outside of MassDEP because it is a great resource and we'd love more and more people to share it. Let's get back into Rachel's presentation. We hit on some hot topics, as Janice alluded to there. Rachel.
Yeah, thanks. So I have like one last section that I want to just highlight from the municipal waste reduction branch. And it's that third leg of our stool, which is focused on technical assistance. And so looking at technical assistance that's provided through the municipal branch, I would say that our municipal assistance coordinators, known as our MACs, are really the front lines of this work. We recognize that there are different needs across the state. There's regions that are rural, urban, suburban, coastal, we have islands, a mix of everything. So our 8 regional MACs are there to work one-on-one with municipalities to identify specific opportunities for waste reduction at the local level. They support municipalities applying for grants, and they also identify challenges and needs, which inform the tools and resources that we create and disseminate to support communities. Over the last 3 years, our MACs have developed statewide working groups that address complex and ongoing issues for municipal officials. Gail Sowurder-Garin, who's formerly a MAC, but now she's at MassDEP, she initiated the Green Sword Working Group, which is focused on school waste reduction and diversion. They now have 160 active participants. They do quarterly meetings. There's a Google website with resources, and they even have some subgroups that can focus on particular issues for school recycling policies, composting, reusable foodware, and environmental education events. Another working group is led by Julia Green. It really dives into the best practices for municipal hauling contracts. So each year, a new cohort of municipalities with expiring contracts is invited to monthly meetings, and they walk through key elements and best practices for a successful procurement process. This provides an opportunity to network with peers, stay up to date on market issues that can strengthen the position. They're educational, really designed for sharing resources and experience. So this year, more than 20 municipalities came to the table for this working group, including the city of Boston. And really, it's valuable because we want municipalities to be educated consumers, understand procurement, and develop confidence in their negotiations when they're seeking a waste and recycling contract. MACs are also available to provide deeper technical assistance for short-term projects through in-kind technical assistance grants, and this is a process that's always open. MACs bring regional knowledge and experience to the table. They work closely to identify needs and opportunities to collaborate. These TA projects allow municipal decision makers to get objective support. So we share best practices and we demonstrate what has worked in other meetings. The slide shows some examples of TA projects that MACs have done. So one of the technical assistance projects that we really prioritize is pay as you throw. And this is because pay as you throw or pay-T programs have really proven to be one of the most effective tools to reduce waste and ensure fairness for all program participants. It's really the gold standard in waste reduction. So we provide support for pay-T programs through an array of resources. This includes the technical assistance, and so MACs are able to help municipalities understand all aspects of a successful pay-T launch, outreach, implementation, and maintenance. Pay-T grant funding is available through our SMRP grant program for both upgrading an existing program or starting a brand new one. And staff has also developed webinars, case studies, website updates, and resources. So there's a lot of information available. Pay-T programs continue to be able to earn high points through our RDP grant, since these programs demonstrate best practices. So again, they're among the top performers. MACs hold periodic webinars and trainings on other topics, keep recycling officials up to date on opportunities and successful practices. The MACs produce a quarterly statewide newsletter developed by the team. It includes updates about grants, upcoming meetings, workshops, and webinars, BMPs, The newsletter is broadcast to all of our municipal contacts, and our metric tracker shows that more than 50% are opening this. Okay, we also have some comprehensive templates on our website that municipalities can utilize. These are designed to be grab and go and do allow for some tailoring on their end. The slide shows some snips from our best practices document for municipalities that are developing private hauler regulations. So these are meant to address subscription collection services as a complement to municipally provided collection programs. And so it's really meant to level the playing field for all haulers and work to ensure access to recycling service for all residents. So by using these templates, the private sector becomes familiar with the uniform requirements and it can streamline expectations. Another set of templates is our municipal procurement of collection and processing services. We have a template for curbside collection, a template for processing recyclables, and guidance for recycling audits. MassDEP has partnered with recyclingmarkets.net, provide discounted municipal subscriptions to this third-party commodity index, and it's really basically to understand the value of recyclables as they decipher complex processing fees and invoices. Our team also works with the state's procurement office, known as the Operational Services Division, to provide state contracts that support municipal programs. So some examples of municipal contracts are for mattress recycling, for household hazardous waste, for wheeled carts, compost bins, public space recycling, pay-as-you-throw bags, and reusable items in school cafeterias and consulting services. So to the slide noted at the beginning, we would like your feedback on all these programs that we provide, including new ideas that you may have that could further support municipal waste reduction in your community. So this is, again, is what I showed at the very beginning, and it's just a summary of what I discussed here. So with that, last break for our Q&A.
Thank you, Rachel, for all that helpful information and a peek into all the different programs that you folks have going on in our municipal waste reduction branch. Any questions? Obviously we had a lively chat earlier, but now would be the time before we move over to the commercial waste reduction branch. I'll just give it a second here. And meanwhile, get my PowerPoint ready.
Yep, I got my hand.
Yes, please.
Great overview, lots of good information. We've put the Recycle Smart widget on our website, and our recycling committee has taken that on the road with a physical display that they bring around at different locations. It was at town hall and the library, also at town meetings, where people come up and they say, you're recyclable or not recyclable, in the cart, not in the cart. And you kind of play a quiz and then you have a little reveal, yes or no. Very effective, and I encourage you to do that. It's also very fun for the volunteers, and maybe a version of that. I know you have a quiz online, but the more you can expand that, the better. From a macro perspective, as a user, municipal participant, and others are out there, the grant program comes up upon us very quickly at the end of the fiscal year, and we're having to, get everything all done and wrapped up, and the schedule is tight, and it's easy to lose track of all the things you could be doing all year long, and the criteria come out sort of midway through the fiscal year. So I just would suggest with all these programs, I talked to Kathy about this maybe this summer, just kind of have a little forum or summit for the folks, the applicants, to kind of look at the program overall, how to keep it going maybe with a newsletter on topics for each of the categories where, every month you're featuring waste prevention. Here are the 20 things that you could be doing, but you're giving specific examples and how to do it and lessons from other communities that were successful in doing those to get the points in their, a newsletter. Every month you're getting this all year long, so it's available to you so that you get reminded to start doing it earlier. We're also busy especially at the end of fiscal year. You're really having to focus, later in the process. So I would encourage that process to continue the full fiscal year, if you understand where I'm coming from, because these programs take time and effort to try to implement a lot of them, and you want them to be successful. So that's just a macro comment, and be happy to participate in that discussion. I know there's a new buy recycle policy requirement coming up. There was a webinar, I missed that. You're going to post that at some point, I presume. So I think that just being, more effective with that program longer term, you get people to do it more, and the more you have successful examples that make it easier for people to implement that haven't done it yet, and don't have to start from zero or scratch on that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And thanks, Rachel. I am going to, in the interest of time, just move it along here. And, Phil, also glad to hear that you had that conversation with Kathy as well.
I'll just pull up Kathy's contact information before I leave. I think most people know her, but if you need to talk to her afterwards, that her contact information is here, and I'm going to stop sharing so that Claudine can.
Great. Yeah, that'll actually be me doing the screen share here for our presentation. And, slideshow. Boom. All right. At this point, I'll introduce Claudine Elliott, who's our branch chief for commercial waste reduction at MassDEP.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, everyone, hello. Claudine, commercial waste reduction branch chief at MassDEP. Next slide, please. So in terms of the solid waste master plan, commercial waste reduction goals, one of every 4 or so loads of trash that MassDEP observes at solid waste facilities contains significant amounts of materials that are banned from disposal. So through inspections, compliance enforcement, and assistance, we do aim to reduce the percentage of waste ban filled loads down to 10% by 2030, so in the next 5 years here. We also plan to reduce the disposal of other targeted materials from businesses and institutions that are not banned from disposal, such as furniture and office equipment. Other priority materials include food material, cardboard, mattresses, and other bulky materials. Next slide, please. All right, so there are a number of commercial waste reduction priorities, including the initiatives described as part of our Recycling Market Development Working Group and Action Plan, as well as launching our Waste Reduction Innovation Grant, expanding the MassDEP waste bans, increasing the amount and frequency of MassDEP waste ban inspections, and technical assistance from Recycling Works and networking, education, outreach, and information sharing. Next slide. The following commercial waste reduction programs we also see as ways to overcome some of the technical, logistical, and economic barriers to recycling market development, which includes grants and loans, as you can see here, compliance and enforcement with the waste bans, and technical assistance and education through MassDEP's Green Team and Recycling Works in Massachusetts programs. Next slide. So in terms of the grants and loans offered through the Commercial Waste Reduction Branch, these include the Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant, the Waste Reduction Innovation Grant, and the Recycling Loan Fund. And within the next couple of slides here, I'll get into some of the details on each of these funding options. Next. Thank you. All right. So since the Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant Program began in 2016, MassDEP has completed its 8th round solicitation for projects under this RBDG program, and we've awarded 74 grants totaling more than $8.5 million. And as you can see here, within the past 5 years, we've awarded 56 grants totaling over $5.5 million for both collection and processing. And these grants will enable Massachusetts reuse and recycling companies to expand and grow their operations and increase the amount and quality of reuse and recycling here in the Commonwealth. So these include awards for a variety of material categories, including food, mattresses, textiles, glass, construction and demolition materials, reuse, and furniture. We're now planning to launch this next RBDG round this fall, 2025, and award amounts for the collection grant range from $25,000 to $100,000 and from $50,000 to $400,000 for processing. There's also a required minimum match by the applicant of 25% for the collection grant and 50% for the processing grant. Next slide, please.
And Claudine, I think for the loan fund here, I'll just preface by saying I used November 2021 as the start of this because with the recycling loan fund, there wasn't really any activity during the key parts of the pandemic. A lot of businesses really weren't looking to take out loans. So that this is just to exhibit that, we have had 11 loans since 2020, but we really had 11 loans in the last 44 months. So yes, please go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, just for our recycling loan fund dating back to a program start date of 1996 and administered under contract to MassDEP by BDC Capital, the fund has provided 91 loans totaling over $20.8 million to over 60 different Massachusetts businesses. And as you can see here, and Sean noted, we provided 11 loans to 8 companies totaling nearly $2.5 million or so within the past 4 years or so. And this recycling loan fund is not limited to specific target materials. Eligible activities include collecting or separating recyclable materials, reuse, processing, composting, or converting of recyclable materials, manufacturing products that use recycled materials, wholesaling or retailing of recycled feedstocks or products, and on-site composting or anaerobic digestion of food waste. So loan amounts are up to $500,000 per loan with terms up to 10 years. And the recycling loan fund can fund anaerobic digestion loans for up to $1.5 million. And the recent recycling loan fund awards by material type have included food materials, organics, construction demolition materials, recycled paper, solar panels, wood, and plastics. Next slide. So in terms of enhancing investment to advance waste reduction innovation and business development per the Solid Waste Master Plan, MassDEP has advanced research and development for new waste reduction and recycling technologies and strategies, and expanded its grant programs to foster development and expansion of recycling markets. And as part of this effort, we've created a new grant program to invest in innovation, and we are currently accepting applications through July 15th. And we're seeking to prioritize materials with limited outlets, such as glass, wood, and asphalt shingles, as well as opportunities for recycling of textiles, as we see reuse markets for textiles to be quite strong. We're also looking at addressing problematic materials within this grant, such as lithium-ion batteries and bulk items. And we posted this application just this past spring, April of 2025. And this innovation grant is split into 2 categories, and applicants may apply for only one grant category, but with the first category focused on startup and pilot projects, and category 2 focused on innovative capital investments. Also, in terms of the evaluation criteria, as mentioned in our grant guidelines, we'll be evaluating project descriptions, feasibility, timeline, potential market impact, sourcing, sustainability, qualifications, and environmental justice community investments. And again, in terms of the timeline of this waste reduction innovation grant, we again posted this in April of this year, and we posted responses to questions Monday, June 16th, and the application deadline again is July 15th. So coming up. Next slide, please. So as was already mentioned, we at MassDEP fund a program called Recycling Works in Massachusetts that provides free technical assistance by helping businesses and institutions reduce waste and maximize recycling, reuse, and food recovery opportunities. There are a number of resources that can be found at recyclingworksma.com, and we encourage you to utilize these resources, including waste ban compliance tip sheets, that can be very helpful with training, for example. So this Recycling Works in Massachusetts Technical Assistance Program, again, is statewide, funded by us, and administered under contract by the Center for Ecotechnology. Recycling Works provides free assistance to businesses and institutions, ranging from phone, email assistance to web resources to virtual on-site TA here in Massachusetts. And this program provides unbiased technical assistance as they're not for or against any particular service provider. Next slide, please. And here's just a snapshot of the TA phone, email, hotline, and website visits over the past 5 years or so, including through fiscal year 2024. And we've also done great this year. But that includes the TA to nearly 200 businesses, over 1,800 phone, email, hotline inquiries, and over 106,000 website visits, again, through FY 2024. Next slide, please. So there are a number of resources that can be found at recyclingworksma.com, as I said, and we often encourage stakeholders to utilize these resources, including the reusable food serviceware container guidance that I'll be speaking to briefly just now. And this guide aligns with the Massachusetts Merged Food Code and aims to reduce single-use disposables. The guidance defines takeout container serviceware as durable containers, plates, bowls, and utensils used to hold food and or beverages. This guide emphasizes that switching from single-use disposables to durable reusable containers is not mandated, which was a point of concern for some of the working group participants. And we find that there are a number of entities that should use this guide, including food establishments such as restaurants, colleges, and universities, hotels, grocers, corporate and hospital cafeterias, caterers, and stadiums utilizing single-use to-go food containers and other disposable serviceware. So we also find that health department officials, recycling coordinators, organizations, and advocacy groups focused on waste prevention may also find this guidance useful. And this best management practice was promoted to health department contacts, the Massachusetts Health Officers Association, the Massachusetts Environmental Health Association, the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards, the Recycling Works newsletter contacts, CET social media, and directly to businesses while offering Recycling Works technical assistance. Next slide, please. And we at MassDEP also oversee a contract known as the Green Team, which is an opt-in educational program for K through 12 schools across Massachusetts. And the 2024 to 2025 school year marks the highest registration in the program in 5 years, with 475 participating green teams comprised over 60,000 students at over 440 schools. So this program empowers students and teachers to help the environment through waste reduction, reuse, recycling, composting, energy conservation, and pollution prevention. All Massachusetts K through 12 classrooms are eligible to register, and you can learn more at the greenteam.org. Back to you, Sean. Thank you all.
Thanks, Claudine. I wanted to, Janet has her hand raised. Yeah, now would be a good point to take a question. Please go ahead.
So for the couple of slides ago, the reusable container slide, and in general for some of the other materials, I think it seems imperative to mention that we have a reusable container infrastructure. It's called the Bottle Bill, and we have been trying to update it for years. And if we want more containers recycled, that's the way to go. And then for plastics, we have a pending bill in the legislature on single-use plastic bag bans, a pending bill to reduce the use of polystyrene, otherwise known as styrofoam. I mean, I think these things are very much connected. So I'm going to put the bill numbers in the chat. But in the past, on the bottle bill in particular, the DEP has been a big supporter, and I feel like we leave that out at the risk of missing an obvious point. So thank you.
Sure. Seeing a lot of raised hands here. So in the interest of time, I'm going to and appreciate your points, Jan, obviously. Let's go to Phil.
I heard solar panels mentioned, and I ran across this where we got a call, or I can't remember how it came about, somebody asking about solar panels, and then I investigated options and then determined that there was an out-of-date listing on the Recycling Works webpage with one of the recyclers, and he addressed that. So I just, for both Recycle Smart side and Recycling Works side and DP overall, I think that's going to start to show up more and more at the municipal level. Anything you do to really communicate proactively in the municipal world, in the general public, that solar panels, need to be recycled, and that, where to do that. And not a lot of the drop-off centers are going to have a container to do that, and there needs to be a way to get that done. I think with the aging out of a bunch of these, are going to see a whole new generation of these coming down the line. So maybe you've already done some of that, but I just see it happening. And then, you get the call on a Friday afternoon. What do I do with 3 solar panels? And, you're scrambling to figure out what to do with it when, of course, we don't want them in disposal facilities. Thanks.
Yeah, that's something that, we've identified as well, and, really seeing that as a market development focal point in the coming years here, Phil. Stephen also has his hand raised from Recycling Works.
Yeah, if I could just add about the reusable container BMP that Claudine mentioned. I will put into our chat a link to the webpage where that can be found. And we also created a quick and easy to use 2-page implementation guide. So if you are a restaurant or other food organization and you are super busy, but you'd like to switch to reusables, it is a quick and easy way to go through the process of switching. I'll put that link in the chat as well.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And, as John kind of described here, my own words, I guess, would be that this meeting in a way is kind of a grab bag way for us to address a lot of different elements of our work and the master plan that, maybe are not covered by some of the specific working groups that we have. So, yeah, we understand that there's going to be, some market development related questions or some legislative things. So all of these links, very helpful. We always, post resources on the MassDEP website following these meetings. So happy to follow up with those. And as always, happy to continue conversations offline that anyone would like to have. Just so, we can get folks off and running to the lunch table here. I'll try and be as efficient as possible. Claudine did an excellent job of fitting a lot of information into a little window there. Just want to hit on the waistbands and some of the work that we've done around that. Obviously, folks in this very SWAC group have advocated for, come on, MassDEP, let's do more with the waistbands. Obviously, this has been a helpful tool that's been on the books for some time. Looking at the waistbands, we say, all right, what materials are taking up a lot of the waste stream, adding a lot of volume? Do we have the infrastructure to support a material ban? So in 2022, we added mattresses, textiles, and we kind of drilled down on the organic material ban to businesses producing more than a half ton per week. We did a lot of, obviously on the side of infrastructure here, the mattresses, there was, direct grant and loan funding for facilities, a lot of work with the cities and towns that was done over the last decade that, Rachel played a big part in. Textiles, that has a pretty established infrastructure in the state. Food material has the infrastructure. We realize it's not perfect. We heard a lot about that in George's presentation as well, but about how it's grown over the past decade plus to support significant gains in food donation and overall food material diversion. And we continue to support all of these, growth in these material categories by supporting the businesses with resources and funding. Some of the outreach that was done at this point, we had a hauler meeting in 2022. We sent out letters to all the relevant facilities. We did outreach to NERC, South Shore Recycling Commission, all the different groups, at the table. There were Rob Taccio, my colleague, who spearheads our waistband efforts. There were 4,500 letters and postcards sent out through 2023 and 2024 to businesses. We also started to list our enforcement for waistbands on the MassDEP website. There were requests for information sent out to 67 different entities for organics and food material over the last couple of years, covering approximately 900 locations. Basically what we're trying to do with that is, figure out who's specifically affected by the waistbands, offer resources, offer kind of a clear sense of what's going on here, because how can you enforce these things if people don't know what's going on? You can see here a table showing the number of inspections, loads observed, and failed loads and again, I did this since 2021. There were reductions in lots of in-person stuff, right, throughout the years 2020 and 2021. So I just decided to focus on the last three. You see the number of inspections that were conducted, loads observed, failed loads as well. And through that time period, that resulted in 465 combined notices of noncompliance and 12 administrative consent orders with penalty. Why is there not an NON for every failed load? There's a lot of reasons. I think the most common would be, and just getting ahead of that question, but we hear it a lot. What if there's a load with like a white good in it? The facility can go in and take a fridge out or whatever pretty easily. You also get front packers coming in with multiple businesses on their route. You can't identify where the waste is coming from. We take every possible pain to go to the waste facility and figure out who brought in this waste. Who's generating this waste. There's clues that you can find in a load of trash. But still at this point, 465 NONs over the last 3 years and 12 ACOPs. Couple of highlights here for results or in conjunction with the waistbands. We've seen food waste diversion growth grow to 380,000 tons. These are numbers that John presented at the February SWAC, so I won't stay on them for too long here. But number of businesses diverting up to 3,120. We've seen mattress growth, in just the first year of the program, up to 400,000 getting recycled. We've seen a big increase in the amount of not only the amount of facilities accepting mattresses, but processing those mattresses in the state. Also a 7% increase, or 3,000 additional tons of textile. And I also mentioned too, there's value with moving on from the waistbands and just kind of looking at this a little more holistically from the RMD work group, and RMD meaning Recycling Market Development Work Group that we have. We've had, I think, 10 meetings now of this particular work group. Through our action plan, we've been able to hit on some of our deliverables, including the innovation grant that Claudine mentioned, the Recycling Business Assistance Guide that we've come out with. We've had a lot of stakeholders at the tables for those meetings. We really hope to leverage those connections and their interest going forward. For some examples, we've had industry associations that we've been able to have conversations with. We've spoken with folks in higher ed. We went to the UMass Lowell Clean Green Challenge and seen what's going on there. On the innovation side, in particular, we've had conversations with a lot of different entities. We've, had more detailed conversations with Mass Development, the Mass Technology Collaborative, Mass Office of Business Development, their Business Front Door program, which is a great tool and resource. We've gotten involved in recycling market development calls nationally with other states. We've spoken with Colorado, Washington, and Michigan about their next cycle programs. We've spoken to the EPA Small Business Innovation Research Program, who presented at one of our meetings. We've talked with incubators and accelerators like Greentown Labs, Forge, Activate. There are others. So, really, again, we're just kind of looking to leverage the fact that there are programs that, support recycling market development, support some of the goals that we're trying to get to through the solid waste master plan. And if we're engaged with these different organizations, hopefully that there's some gains that Kimberly brought about, access to funding, kind of opening our eyes on some different technologies that are going on, and so it's all about support and resources at the state level. So we're looking to kind of work in conjunction with other folks who can help and maybe solve some of the issues that we're having, like Phil said, solar panels. And I also see a hand raised for Phil, so I'm gonna get to you right now, Phil. Go ahead.
I'll be very brief on your last comment. I've mentioned this before. The state as a market is extremely important, and I think you need to, and I'm sure you have been doing this, look at MassDOT. Chief Hoffer mentioned this at the Mass Recycle conference, that construction and materials for construction use an enormous amount of energy. And I put in there that Cape Cod Bridges program, because we have a $2 billion investment on Cape Cod for replacement of the Sagamore Bridge, to be followed by the Bourne Bridge. So you're looking at $4 billion of infrastructure in the next 10 years that could consume a lot of recycled content in the way they make the concrete, the cement with pozzolan, or asphalt shingles and glass, and et cetera, et cetera. So I really urge you to get in on that early. Same with DCAM and new construction. I think there's some markets the C&D folks can maybe work together with DOT, and there are examples all around the country of other DOTs doing this. The other I put in there is the Mass Ready Act. I had the privilege of going to the announcement this week with the governor. Huge bond bill, for those who don't know, on the environment, and in there was $28 million for solid waste and recycling. Of course, John and everybody, he knows that, but I raised it to the attention of others who may not know it. So look forward to seeing that move through the legislature, and there was infrastructure money in there for composting and things like that. So maybe you can talk about that at a future meeting, and how that's going to work its way through the legislative process, and what opportunities may come out of that to help all these initiatives that you're talking about today.
Yeah, thank you, Phil, for mentioning that. And, obviously, a number of the other things that you brought up in the course of this conversation, and to all of our commenters and folks with questions. We realize that there's different moving parts here. There'll probably be more to say on the Mass Ready Act, in the future, as you noted. And some of our programs have come to maturity. Some of them are still moving along. Some of them are still being, developed, right? So this kind of is a way for us, for the municipal branch, to kind of give a snapshot of where we are, or for some of those things that we haven't been able to reach out about in our other work group meetings, where we are at MassDEP, and trying to accomplish our solid waste master plan goals. We feel like there's a lot of stuff in motion. There's always room for more, and we appreciate folks who are active and engaged in this group, and continue to fight the good fight out there. So again, listing some of our priorities. Like I said, I was trying to come a little bit full circle by talking about the RMD work group, and just some of the great organizations that we feel like we're better connected with now, and continue to try and get better connected with. And all of those connections help in what we're doing in terms of, business development. Obviously we've made a lot of effort on the waste bans over the last 5 years. Claudine gave kind of an overview of all the great work that Recycling Works is doing. All of this is kind of on the platter in terms of what we're trying to put together. So if there's any feedback or remaining questions at this point, happy to take them. And I'll also just throw up our team, our commercial waste reduction teams contacts. Soaib is our head for the recycling and reuse business development grants. Joanne's done a great job on our recycling market development work, specifically the innovation grant, which Claudine mentioned. Of course, I'm up there as well, and you heard from Claudine earlier. And again, happy to continue these conversations. There's a lot of important stuff going on out there right now. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with all of it. So thanks to everybody who brought some of that perspective to today's meeting. I do see some things in the chat. I haven't checked that in a little while. I think the metal conversation is still going on. We've got some created attendees here. But yeah, unless there's anything else specific, I'll call it for now. We'll reconvene this group in October. But yeah, I've written down a lot of notes. We'll post this to the MassDEP website, the recording to the MassDEP website, and we probably have some follow-up conversations to be had as well in the coming days. But in case, actually I see Ricky with a hand raised. Ricky, please.
Hey, how you doing? In your last slide, it said expanded waistbands. Is it the case that you intend to expand those further?
Yeah, that was on the menu as a possibility through the solid waste master plan. I think it was specifically referred to in the chat, about would there be a residential, food material recycling ban. That's something that, we've touched on in previous SWAC meetings. I know the organic subcommittee and John, had a specific comment in the chat. The organic subcommittee is looking at that specifically, the kind of the mechanics of that and what it might look like. And I see John's hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, that's right. That's the one material that we're actively considering for an expanded waistband right now. Not a new material, but expanding the threshold for the food waste disposal ban. Along the way, there have been other materials that have been floated to us for consideration for an additional waistband. We haven't really been actively working on a waistband for any of these, but they're materials for potential consideration. Some of those include solar panels, which was touched on earlier.
Yeah.
Asphalt shingles has come up a few times as potential waistband material. I think each of those have, every new waistband material has to be kind of considered specifically and addressed specifically. Markets and infrastructure have to be worked out. And so at this point, we're not actively working on new waistbands for any of those materials. The one would be the exception that Sean mentioned, actively considering and discussing the potential for lowering the food waste disposal ban threshold. That's the one that's actually, works potentially.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Ricky. Yeah, but in lieu of anything else, I think I'll say to folks, collectively here, have a great summer. Don't be a stranger. Again, we love the fact that these meetings are well attended, that you bring your insight to the table, and we look forward to speaking with you and hearing from you in the coming months before we reconvene this group in October. So thank you to George, thank you to Rachel and Claudine also there for their presentations, for John as well, and we'll talk to you again soon.